Hi guys, welcome back aboard good old Athena here in Mindelo in the Cape Verde Islands. In last week's video we managed to fix our steering issue. We played a very extensive hide and go seek game with the leak that's causing our bilge pump to set off about once an hour. And we also found a bit of oil dripping from our drive unit for the autopilot. Earlier today we dropped off the drive unit at a local mechanic. He seems to do a little bit of everything, so hopefully he can fix the leak. If he can, then we'll most likely start our Atlantic crossing on Saturday. If he can't, well, then I'm gonna get to see a lot more of Cape Verde. My name is Mess, this is my wife Ava. I've spent the last 5 years on a somewhat extensive refit of our 1987 Warrior 38 named Athena. That was a DIY fun-packed adventure complete with a very extensive osmosis treatment, building a new rudder using vacuum infusion, rebuilding the entire deck, gutting and subsequently rebuilding most of the interior, painting the top sides, and a ton of other projects. The summer of 2021 we started cruising full time. Now we're finally ready to begin our adventure. The amount of time we spent last week searching for that leak that's causing the bilge pump to go off was astonishing. But I think we've finally nailed it down to being the chain locker. Long story short, this is a cross section of the hull in the chain locker compartment. There's a false floor made out of plywood that's tabbed to the hull using fiberglass. We think what's happened is a tiny bit of delamination in the tabbing. And it just so happens to be that area where I drilled the overboard drain. So that means there's a gap between the tabbing and the hull, allowing water into this area. There are multiple ways for us to fix this issue. I opted for the nuclear option, which was to completely rip out the old floor. An oscillating multi-tool is a great option for cutting through tabbing without running the risk of damaging the hull. As you can see, the plywood bottom or the floor was absolutely soaking wet. There was definitely a leak here. I wrapped myself in a blanket and put down a sheet on the V-berth in an attempt to keep the dust in the forward cabin to a minimum. There was no suitable material for the new floor aboard the boat, but there is a lumber place on the outskirts of town. The smallest piece of hardwood they had was about 2.5 meters long and cost a whopping 10 euros. With my new friend under my arm, I walked the 30 minutes back to the marina, passing by the African market and the street where a bunch of people sell produce and fish. I used the old floor as a rough template for the new floor. This doesn't have to be super accurate. Thickened epoxy and fiberglass will compensate for any lack in accuracy. A 40 grit disc on an angle grinder made short work of cleaning up the surface of the wood, and I also made a little block to join together the two pieces. With copious amounts of thickened epoxy and some beefy screws, I joined everything together. Not a thing of beauty, but way stronger than the old floor. This thing has been curing overnight, and like I said, it's not exactly a thing of beauty, but it will be way stronger than the old floor. I'm just gonna bevel the edges here so we get a nice fit in the chain locker, and then we should be ready to glass the thing in. Getting the angle of the hull right took a little bit of trial and error with Mr. Angle Grinder. When I finally had a good fit, I mixed up a big blob of thickened epoxy and put down a generous fillet. After cleaning up the excess, I mixed up some unthickened epoxy and wetted everything out. I'm using some of the fancy Basalt fiber I mentioned in last week's video. It might look slightly like carbon fiber when it's wetted out, but I assure you it is completely different. I thought it was really cool to see the color change as it got wetted out. Fiberglass goes more translucent when wetted out. This looks cooler. So far so good. We'll leave that to cure overnight. Now, up until last week when I met Robert that I mentioned in last week's video, I'd never heard about basalt fiber. But since that video I've done a little bit of reading, and this stuff is pretty cool. Apparently it has 10 and 20 to 40% better mechanical properties than fiberglass. It has a way lower environmental impact. I think it's like 10% of the impact of fiberglass, and it is cheaper than carbon fiber by a lot, but still a little bit more expensive than glass. I'll save this little piece as kind of a conversation piece. Of course, for a repair like this, the basalt fiber is complete overkill. I only used it because I got the scrap from Robert and because I was excited to see how it was to work with. It wets out really easily, and other than that, it's just like working with fiberglass. Tomorrow I should be able to re-drill the overboard drain, then we can get the chain back in there, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll be done with that pesky leak. The next morning I busted out my trusty old Bosch 150 turbo sander and got busy with the Oh Glorious prep work, including a little bit of hand sanding in the corners. I wanted to completely remove the chain from the chain locker prior to painting. It would really suck to lose the chain overboard, so I tied it down before pulling out the bitter end. Oh Glorious sanding always produces copious amounts of man glitter. I cleaned up the worst of it before scrubbing the chain locker thoroughly with a stiff brush. There is very little air movement in the chain locker. Our big box fan helped dry out the compartment a lot quicker. To beautify the chain locker, I found a local fiberglass place and purchased 2 kilograms of top coat. After having given the old water bottle a vigorous shaking, I poured 400 milliliters in a cup and catalyzed it at 1% using a syringe from the pharmacy. Applying the top coat in the cramped space was an action-packed adventure, complete with burning eyes due to the poor air circulation and a quick leg cramp. It took all of the 2 kilograms, but the chain locker eventually started looking much better. The chain locker is looking 1000% spiffier since we got here to Mendello. It is now leak-free, hopefully, and also shiny white. Now, seeing it like this really makes me want to add a little light in there, but I think we'll just add that to the upcoming projects list. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, the drive unit for the autopilot is at a local mechanic where Eddie is trying to bring it back to life. He's found a seal that's almost the right size. Now Eddie's doing a great job, especially with what's available here on the island, so I'm still hopeful that the autopilot will come back to life. If the drive unit works, then we'll head for the Caribbean. If it doesn't, then I'll have to extend my visa here in Cape Verde. So a little bit earlier today we headed out to make sure that that was in fact an option. We found the local immigration office that can issue visas longer than 30 days, which is what we got by default when we arrived. It turns out all the visa stuff is handled in this delightfully blue building only about 10 minutes from the marina. According to the very nice lady behind the counter, there's absolutely no issue in me staying a little bit longer than 30 days. Now that is plan B. I'm still crossing my fingers for plan A. Speaking of plan A, yesterday afternoon we got the drive unit back from Eddie, but there's something that's always been odd about this drive unit, and that's the fact that it's always been super hard to manipulate the ram here by hand. You guys saw me manipulate the one in the technical compartment, the spare, in last week's video. I could do that with one hand sitting at an odd angle. This one, on the other hand, it is very, very tough to manipulate, and it goes both ways. Like, it's also very hard to get back in, and like I said, that's always been the case, so this is 100% not because of anything Eddie has done. The manufacturer of these drive units is closed today. It's Saturday, so we'll give them a call Monday and see if they had some kind of explanation for the resistance in the piston rod. I think in terms of what we can do here today, the best thing we can do is to strap this guy on and go for a little bit of a test sail to see if he's leaking oil. These units aren't supposed to break down as quickly as we have had them done here aboard Athena, and I can't really explain why. But one of the things I really like about them is that they're super easy to remove, and while that's nice when you're in a marina, it's even nicer if you're underway and you need to replace one. It is just one pin you pull, and then it is this connector here to the brain box for the autopilot. The pin I mentioned is back here. I'm not sure if you guys can see it or not. It's a little cramped here in the cockpit locker, but there's a little bolt you have to undo, and then you can use that bolt for pulling out the pin. Just like that. And then the drive unit simply just lifts off the mount. Here's a little bit of a comparison between the stiffness or the resistance in the piston rods. This is the leaky unit we just pulled out, and well, as you can see, I can easily manipulate this one, whereas the other one, it's just very, very reluctant. The repaired unit is all strapped in and ready to go. Now we sent a video of the resistance in the piston rod to the manufacturer, and hopefully they'll give us some kind of feedback on Monday. Like I mentioned in last week's video, I have no idea why these units keep leaking on us. The first one started leaking after 1500 miles, and then the next one started leaking after 3000 miles. Now the one that started leaking on the way here, that could possibly have something to do with the sound we heard from the steering, but I don't know. I don't know how these are designed, if they get damaged if you overload the piston rod, or yeah, I just don't know. But the first one that broke, the one that's been repaired and is mounted now, I am 99% sure we didn't have a steering issue back then. This is the unit that started leaking, and I don't know if you can see it, maybe in the reflection of the light, but down here there's a little bit of oil. Before we head out for a test sail and go through all the trouble of slipping the lines and all of that and reversing back in, I think it makes a lot of sense to just test the autopilot here at the pontoon. Let's engage the autopilot and see what happens. There is no way I am going to see with that unit as a backup. That sounds horribly wonky. Here's our somewhat impressive collection of Hypro ML40 drive units. The one back there is the one we had repaired. That one over there is the leaky one, and this one is a brand new one straight out of the box. I'll install the brand new one in the cockpit locker, and then we'll set the other two ones aside. I am sure somebody's going to comment saying, but Mess, why do you need a working autopilot and a spare for that autopilot, and also the Windvane, because we do have a Windvane? Well, sadly, in a rare instance of amazing timing, right before we left the Canary Islands, I got an email from the Windvane manufacturer saying that they'd had one of the Windvane rudders fail on another boat crossing the Atlantic, and we have that same design. They've already come up with a new design for the Windvane rudder, but unfortunately there was no time to ship it out to us in the Canary Islands before we had to leave. So we still have the old design. So yeah, I don't have 100% faith in the Windvane rudder. For me, it all comes down to risk versus reward, right? It would be nice to be able to leave Mindelo and get to the Canaries, but there is no real reward for taking the risk of only crossing with one working drive unit, because well, we still don't know why these units keep failing. On the other hand, if we just stay here for a little bit longer, we can have Ava fly out with a brand new unit, and then we'll have a working one and a working spare. I think that's going to end up being our course of action. Just for a quick comparison, this is what the brand new healthy drive unit sounds like. That, at least to my ears, sounds a heck of a lot better. You may have noticed some music in the background. That is because we're here during Carnival. It is a huge event here in Mindelo. The crew was super excited. Now, as for me, I'm not that fond of big crowds, so it wasn't really my scene, but it was very impressive. It's a couple of days later. We've been on and off the phone a bunch of times with the drive unit manufacturer, aka Hypro. Now, we've shown them the drive unit installation here aboard Athena, and they could see no issue with the installation. That is both good and bad news. I'm happy I haven't messed something up, but on the other hand, I was hoping they would spot something obvious that could explain why these units are failing. So there's currently no explanation as to why these two units have started leaking, but we have gotten confirmation that the resistance I showed you in the piston rod of the first unit a little bit earlier in the video is not supposed to be like that. So something has been wrong with that unit since I received it. Maybe it got damaged in shipping, or who knows what, but it's always had that resistance. Hypro has made a great effort to try and help us diagnose the issue over the phone, but there's only so much you can do over the phone. We're kind of out of ideas. So now they've offered to take the two broken units apart for us and also refurbish those units. Hopefully that'll tell us a little bit about what went wrong with them. I think that is awesome, and I really love it when a manufacturer just stands behind their product and goes the extra mile. My best bet right now is that the first unit was broken when I got it because of that resistance in the piston rod. As for the second unit, I guess maybe the steering issue we had coming down here could explain why it started leaking, but I don't know. I would hope the drive units are engineered in such a way that they can handle a rudder jam or something like that, but yeah, I just don't know the internals of these units. We were delayed a week or so in leaving Tenerife, and we've been here in Mindelo for about 2 weeks now, so we're running kind of behind schedule here. That means Julian and Mark are out of time, so they're going to be flying out of Mindelo. Now, Mark lives in the UK, so he's going to bring the 2 broken units back to Hypro and have them refurbished there. Now, there is a little bit of a silver lining to this whole situation, and that's the fact that Ava is done with her job, so she's now ready to fly back and rejoin the boat, which means she'll be coming on the Atlantic crossing after all. I am really excited about that, and so is Ava. Being stuck here in Mindelo for a little bit is not the end of the world. The weather is fantastic, and also it'll give me a chance to install the air conditioning on the boat before we're somewhere where we actually need the air conditioning. That means it's going to be a far less sweaty installation, which sounds fantastic to me. So for the next couple of weeks, I'm going to swing back into DIY mode, and then when Ava rejoins the boat, then I think we'll go out and explore Mindelo a little bit and shoot a video about that, because those videos are a lot more fun to shoot when Ava is here. So yeah, I hope you guys are ready for a little bit of DIY and exploration. But yeah, that's going to be the end of this week's video. As always, feel free to leave a comment down below, and don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video, please remember to leave a like. See you!